a modern podcast where Chris and Mike talk about TV, movies, superheroes, and everything in between. It's time for Superhero Slate.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Superhero Slate, the show where we run down the latest superhero entertainment news.
We love TV, movies, and superheroes, so let's talk it all out.
My name's Chris Dillard.
And my name's Mike Royer.
And this is a super special spoiler cast for Marvel Avengers Age of Ultron!
Whoa. This is where we would add those air horns if we had a sound effects board.
if we had the talent to do that, yes.
Yeah, but this is a big deal. We've been waiting for this movie forever. You know, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, we've been hyping this movie since episode 1.
This is the second movie on my list of this year. We talked about in the first podcast the movies we're excited for. Mm-hmm. This was my second one I'm excited for, and I think I'm 2 for 2, just like you're 2 for 2 on bad movies.
Yeah, we definitely we're definitely in the predictive fields. We should change our careers and be like betters or something.
We are telepathic, man. We can view the future.
Oh, but man, so yeah, we're just basically gonna dive right into the film. You know, this is obviously the spoiler cast. We're not gonna hold anything back. So I don't think I've met anyone out there who would willingly go into a spoiler cast for a movie like this without seeing it. So I don't know if you're that type of person. You should send us an email and let us know why you aren't watching the movie yet.
Why do you want us to ruin it for you rather than you just going and watching it? Like that makes no sense. Like I went in like as blind as I could, and I was so surprised, and those surprises made the movie that much better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we purposely talked about on the last couple episodes how we have been trying very, very rigorously to keep all of the spoilers out of our heads. And we stopped watching the trailers after – well, I know I stopped watching the trailers after trailer 2, I believe. So there was a teaser trailer, and then – was there a second teaser trailer?
I mean, we had one teaser trailer, and then 3 regular trailers.
Yeah, I stopped after the second trailer.
No, we watched the third trailer together.
I think you watched the third trailer.
We talked about it.
I don't know. I'll have to go back. Well, either way, I think the next time a Marvel movie of this scale comes out, I think I'm going to scale it back on the trailers a little bit.
I'll tell you, I accidentally got tricked into one TV spot, but thankfully that didn't ruin anything. I think they're keeping a lot of the good stuff out.
Yeah.
So spoilers. You ready for this?
Oh, I'm ready. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about Ultron.
So first off, I'm going to give you an overview of what the movie's done so far. It's the second highest opening day ever in America for a movie.
Mm-hmm. And this would this be the Friday or the Thursday?
Friday.
Okay.
Actually it beat the original Avengers by 9 million on Thursday night.
Oh man.
But on Friday it's the second highest opening ever. Couldn't quite beat Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2.
I think that's okay. I mean, that was like 8 movies in the making. So
that is 8 movies in the making. It had a lot of sequels beforehand. A lot of kids go to that one. As much as I like to see kids at this one, it's a little darker, I think. I saw one family leave the screening I was at today.
Oh, wow.
So that was interesting. It made $340 million overseas its first week.
Ooh, that's a chunk of change. I mean, I believe, if I remember right, I think the budget for this film was, $250 million?
I don't know.
I think I looked it up, and I believe the budget was around 250. So there was no question that they're going to be making their money back. But it's kind of funny that they're like, oh, let's release this overseas before the U.S. gets it, just so we can pay the accountants, and then we can just be all profit from here on out.
Yeah, exactly. The budget production estimated at $250 million. So you're right on the money there.
They made that back real quick.
And just overseas, it's not even in America. In America, it's the second biggest opening ever so far for the weekend. There are lots of factors kind of going in play here, like the Kentucky Derbies this weekend. There was a boxing fight.
Yeah, the Pacquiao Mayweather fight.
It's just plus that was this morning. They had no Sunday numbers yet, and the theater I was in was full.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see if this beats the original Avengers, and if it's going to, I don't really know if it's on track to beat, Titanic or Avatar, but it'll be curious to see if that happens.
I would like to see it at least beat the original Avengers. because even it's very rare a sequel does better than the first film, like, you know, in reviewing and money wise. So I think it'd be great. I'm trying to see what the first Avengers is kind of ranked at here on Box Office Mojo. The original Avengers, it's not showing me something. I think it's over like 1.2 billion.
Man.
So it's got a little ways to go, but I mean, 7 days and it's already sitting at 600, half of that. And I've got a few more viewings in me. I don't know about you.
You're going to contribute a little bit more to the box office, huh?
Yeah, I'm telling them to shut up and take my money.
Man, but
every day.
Yeah, but this was obviously no surprise. We knew this was going to be raking in the dough, so that's no surprise to us when it comes to this film.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited for it. There's the Avengers. It beat the Avengers opening day by at least 4 million. So that's good. And yeah, so I'm ready to hear some reviews. Mike, are you ready to give me some reviews?
Yeah, I'll just jump right into it because, if people are out there following you, they can already see your review up on ComicUI. But of course, you're gonna reinstate what you thought about the film. So I've seen the film twice already, and I've been really trying to collect my thoughts about this movie. I wanted to come in here with like a really hard form opinion about what I feel about this movie, but I think it's still kind of ever evolving. I enjoyed it more the second time for sure. But that's not to say I didn't like this movie. I'll just flat out and say this is a good movie. I would recommend this movie to anybody. It's fun. It's an awesome summer blockbuster movie. But I mean, when it comes down to us, we're superhero fanatics. I mean, we record our conversations every week about how much we love superheroes. So when we go into the movie, I think that we're not necessarily more critical, but we kind of expect a certain quality. And I think the best way that I can kind of rate or review this movie is comparing it to the other Marvel movies. If you listen to our Superhero Slate episode this week, you'll hear me say that I think I would rank this just below Guardians of the Galaxy. I think the first original Avengers is overall better in my mind for this movie, but I think Ultron had a lot to compete with. I mean, not only is Ultron coming off the heels of one of the two best Marvel movies of all time, Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. People love those movies. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to compete with them, but it's coming off the heels of those movies. And plus it has to come off the heels of the original Avengers movie, which was just like, it was that was an experience seeing that movie, the original Avengers. It was the first time we ever got to see all these characters together. And, I don't think we really had as much information going into the original Avengers movie. Unfortunately, Phase 3 is all planned out. We know exactly what we're getting in Phase 3. We know the movies that are coming. We already kind of know the plot line that's going to be in Infinity Wars, because it's not too hard to Google what the Infinity Gauntlet is, so you don't even have to read the Infinity Gauntlet comic book to kind of see what's coming. So I think that's one thing that takes a little steam out of the movie. It's just kind of like where it's going to be heading. But overall, this is a really fun film. I've heard a lot of people describe it as the most comic book movie a movie's ever been. When I'm watching the movie, I can almost see the panels being drawn and the word bubbles being placed. When kind of a fight scene ends, or like a scene or an arc ends, I can kind of see that last page in a comic book being made. And then when they go into the next act, I can see the next issue being drawn. So it really does feel like a comic book, which, it's what you're looking for when you're coming to these movies. But I was kind of looking for a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more of a movie going experience. Right off the bat, when we get into this movie, is easily my favorite scene in the whole movie is at the very beginning when they're riding in on that Hydra facility.
That opening tracking shot.
Oh man, and it's firing on all cylinders, and it really, really made me remember the final fight in the first Avengers movie when they're all finally working on all cylinders and they're fighting all the Chitauri coming through the portal, and they're all teaming up in different original ways, and we get that right off the bat in this movie, and that was so awesome. I was grinning from ear to ear, and I'm sure if anyone was looking at me, they would think I was literally like a kid in a candy store who just was addicted to sugar. I mean, oh man, my smile was so big. And it being said, that was my favorite part of the movie. Technically, everything was kind of downhill from there. Not saying that going it went too far downhill. It's not like we dropped into a valley or a ravine. But I think that the beginning action scene was my favorite, and it was just really, really great. We got right into the quippy Whedon-isms, as some people have been calling them. You know, you get that nice Whedon humor interjected in there with the heroes. And I think, honestly, when people go to an Avengers movie, and I'd say lesser so any Marvel movie, they're looking for some of that humor, you know, and I think we definitely got the humor in this movie. But, you know, I think I definitely don't want to hate on this movie. This is not a bad movie in any respect. But I think the only way I can kind of talk about this movie and how I felt about it is to maybe bring up some of the things I didn't like so much, which is gonna sound maybe, you know, a little pessimistic. But there are some parts in the movie that I kind of wish they they kind of maybe could have had another pass over, or maybe thought of another way to do it. And I think the movie could have shined just as good or even better than the original Avengers movie. But I think this is definitely a solid addition to the franchise. I had a great time. I mean, like I said, I went and saw the movie twice. I wouldn't go see a movie twice if I didn't like it. So I think this was a cool addition. You know, I think we'll talk about the things that I didn't like a little bit later. But, you know, I want to hear what you thought about the movie, and then we can kind of dive into the nitty-gritty and get incremental with what happened in the movie.
So, as you know, I wrote my review after my first showing on Thursday night. So my review was fresh Friday morning. It was up there. And after one viewing, I was like, this is okay. Yeah, this is good. I don't know how I feel yet. I had to let it sink in. I watched it a second time Friday night. Even though my seats weren't the best seats in the house, like I talked about, I actually enjoyed it more the second time. Much like you said you did. Because the first viewing is so dense. To use a word that you use, it is a dense film. It is throwing everything at you. Nothing is wasted.
Yeah, it's
on screen.
It's kind of weird walking out of a movie, you know, with your friends, and you just kind of walk out and no one's really saying anything because you're just kind of like trying to process what just happened on that first showing.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I think I was a little harsher on it the first time because my inner film critic came out in me. You know, my background is in filmmaking. But I would be much nicer on it now. I actually hold it higher than the first Avengers film, kind of a little opposite of yours. Whereas I thought the final point of the film was better than the first. And that's not to say that you're wrong, but to me, Ultron, and this is something I heard, Ultron, like, we all know Loki is the best villain in the Marvel Universe. Everyone is like, oh, Ultron, Ultron can't beat Loki. Walking out of the theater, people were like, Ultron is actually giving Loki a run for his money. And I think that's a sign of a good movie where we get a good villain, you know, from start to finish. I don't think it's the last we're gonna see of Ultron, to be frank, but he was a great villain. The movie moves really quickly. There are some parts in there, and we're gonna talk about this. I think, again, like, you're right, it's easier to point out the bad things and the good things at this point because there's so much right. The opening tracking shot, the first spoken word of the movie is shit.
Yeah, language, please.
I mentally noted that. Like, this is the first said word of the whole film. Like, there's gibberish stuff in the background, like, but that's about it. So it was very, very entertaining there. Again, this feeds right off of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I thought was much cooler than the first movie. Not first movie, Winter Soldier tie-in. So I thought that was kind of fun. The team is really cohesive at the beginning. They get torn down. They have to come back and defeat Ultron. But like you said, there are some points in there that just didn't make sense to me. And as many times as I've seen it, I still can't draw the lines. And I feel like there's an hour left on the cutting room floor somewhere, and I think that would have helped explain things. But with a 2.5 hour movie, how do you put those in there?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that is a little unfortunate is, like, we're obviously two huge fans of the original Avengers film, and obviously, you know, we have very high expectations for the film. So when things come along in the film that probably some other viewers can easily kind of just push off to the side, you know, it just kind of nags in the back of our head a little bit more than most.
Yeah, and it's definitely something we can converse about. I think most people wouldn't pay attention. And things that we're paying attention to, like, you know, because we converse about this weekly, we think about it a little harder and probably dig too deep into things that we shouldn't be digging into. But the biggest seller for me is, again, is you talked about this looks like a comic book film, and you wanted something a little more. Well, to me, this actually looked more like a movie than the last one, which looked more like a comic book.
Oh, yeah?
Because of, again, the bright sets, the bright colors, everything's well lit. This was a little moodier. It was a little darker in tone and visuals. And from that, I enjoyed it. I love it. I love the movie. It's not my favorite Marvel movie. Captain America, Iron Man, and Guardians sit above it, but it's still above the first Avengers to me.
Okay.
And
well,
that's to touch on it briefly, but we're going to go into things we dislike. So, go ahead.
All right. Well, I think we can kind of just break this up into the 3 different acts, and we can kind of just dive in here. We'll kind of point out the things that we enjoyed and the things that we didn't enjoy, and we can see if we can kind of arrive at something here. I think one thing that I've heard from several people is this movie is very dense. It has a lot going on in the movie.
Yes, it does.
And I think saying to that is this was Whedon's last addition to the Avengers, and quite possibly the Marvel Universe. He obviously has not been attached to any other movies, and I don't know if there's been an official record that he won't be doing any other Marvel movies at all. The future is very long, and has a long career in front of him. So I don't think we can say permanently that he'll never do another Marvel movie. But I almost think that the amount that had to be crammed into this film might be the reason why Whedon has stepped down from doing the Infinity Wars. I don't necessarily know if he did step down or if there was like a mutual decision made there at the studio. But I can kind of feel that maybe Whedon, this was a little bit too much for him to tackle. We have a lot of characters in this film, and in the first act we finally get to see the twins. We get to see Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, and I think they were introduced really great. In some of the previous episodes of Superhero Slate, I stated that I was a little bit worried about their origin coming from Loki's spear. I was kind of hoping they might find another way. I couldn't really think of a way that they could do it, but I think it went really well. The human experimentation angle wasn't too far-fetched, and I got along pretty well with that, so that wasn't a big deal for me. But overall, I think that first fight scene, like we said, was awesome. I would say it was nearly perfect. I didn't really have any issues with that raid on the Hydra base. I thought things were really cool. Was there anything like specifically in that opening scene that you want to talk about?
In the beginning, honestly, not really. We see List, the guy who played List in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's actually been pretty prominent in S.H.I.E.L.D. And he's there. Yeah, there's a lot of humor in that first thing to punctuate the seriousness of what's going on. Hawkeye gets shot, but at the same time, Iron Man's like, good conversation, and some guy's like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, and we also have some of those people inside of the Hydra base that with a really bizarre accent, but he's like, but they're the Avengers. We can't fight them. and that got a big laugh in the audience, and then kind of the bait and switch where he's telling them all not to surrender, and then he leans over to his first in command or whatever. He's like, okay, so we're going to surrender.
Yeah, and it was cool, to see the scepter and that big Chitauri creature for the first time again. Yeah, those throwbacks to the first. This is a good sequel to the first Avengers. You don't need the ones in between. And this pick kind of up we've been chasing the scepter. Okay, great, that's awesome, and that was a great throwback to that.
Yeah, and it kind of showed you a pretty good motivation why all these characters might be sticking around. Because obviously, Thor, why are you still on Earth? We get it that you got a girl here on Earth, but some crazy stuff is going on in Asgard. We're pretty sure that your brother is trying to take over the whole kingdom. Maybe you should go back and take a visit. But he's obviously on a mission. They're basically trying to do some cleanup from the battle that happened in New York. So I like the motivation there of why all these heroes were still together.
Yeah, and honestly, you didn't need to go in with anything else. They didn't need to explain it. They just jumped in, and that was it, and that was great. Other than that, I don't think there was anything that stuck out in that first section. Yeah, well, we got a pretty specific new kind of plot point that runs through the film. We kind of got to look at Black Widow and Hulk. Bruce Banner and
and Natasha. Yeah. So we got introduced to this concept of the lullaby, which
I don't know how that works. That's actually a good question. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much explanation, but I think we can just kind of assume that since Banner and the Hulk are such assets to the Avengers, they kind of had to find a way to control them, and it seemed to be an explanation that they kind of find a way to kind of do this kind of like tantric, kind of like mind soothing like thing with touching of the hands and stuff, and I don't know if it's necessarily connected to the romantic interest between those two, but I thought that was kind of cool that they finally kind of have a way to like calm down the Hulk. But that also never really seemed to be an issue towards the end of the last film. He says, "My secret is I'm always angry." So but we kind of got an official statement kind of going through this movie that the Hulk is still kind of a loose cannon, and we still got to be really careful with him.
Yeah, and also this up Sokovia as a good fictitious nation or country, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and oh man, I think we got to talk about that kind of that freeze frame shot that was in all the trailers. Did your audience, your movie theater, go crazy when that first popped up?
Which one?
When they're all kind of they all jump out of the cars.
Oh, not really. Honestly, my biggest surprise was when it kept going. It builds up to them all jumping across the screen at the same time, but then it goes for like another minute, and I'm like, oh, this isn't done. Okay, I'm back in the game here. So
that first scene there was just like a roller coaster ride. And do you think the Scarlet Witch's visions that she kind of puts in their heads, they seem to state that they're almost seeing a possible future, maybe. I thought it was kind of cool seeing all those characters kind of supposedly dead that Tony was seeing on those segments of rocks, those rock stairs. It kind of alludes to this was a similar structure that we've seen Thanos on. We're gonna see are we gonna see heroes dying in Infinity Wars?
See, I don't think so. I think the only one that possibly showed the future instead was Thor's. Everyone else seemed to be backpedaling because Sony saw the hole with the wormhole and the Chitauri coming through towards Earth. Like Avengers, Captain America saw his past where he missed a dance, and Black Widow saw her history in the Red Room.
Yeah, I think it's kind of confusing because you want to say Scarlet Witch, but then you want to say Scarlett Johansson, and then it gets all muddled up. So
it does. So you have to forgive us, but we don't know what the Hulk saw either, which was kind of disappointing.
But overall, I think that scene was pretty important because it definitely that kind of mental control is a through line through the entire film. So that's really important to kind of settle down.
Yeah, I mean, it shows her relation to the Mind Gem is very intimate.
But next we kind of we roll back to the Avengers Tower, which is another scene that got a little bit of an applause from the audience when you kind of finally see that Avengers A on the side of Tony Stark's building. It looks like it's been remodeled a little bit to kind of fit a Quinjet in there.
It's the same one we saw in Winter Soldier, but yeah, we definitely get to see it for the first time up close.
Yeah, but yeah, we kind of finally get into it kind of slows down a little bit. We get a chance for the characters to talk. This part was we had more of a humor in it. This leads into that party scene where they're trying to pick up the hammer that we all saw in the trailers. And this is one thing where I think maybe I will try to watch fewer trailers because I don't think that you were going to be able to get away from that perfect, hilarious scene because it was in one of the first trailers. Possibly maybe part of it was in the teaser trailer if I remember correctly, but I mean that was a gold scene. That was hilarious. All of them picking up the hammer, Captain America wiggling it a little bit, and Thor getting really worried. That part is just too good, and I really love that. But before we got to that, we kind of got to get a little background of Ultron. I wasn't expecting to hear his name so soon.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the issues I have is they just name drop Ultron. I'm like, yeah, we can build Ultron. What the hell's an Ultron?
Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have had that code name so soon.
Yeah, or at least had it spelled out somewhere, like it's an acronym. Like Jarvis, and later we see Friday and Jocasta. They're all acronyms, and maybe Ultron was an acronym as well, and we just did not get it. And I think that was a scene that probably was cut from there. Because that would just happen so soon. I mean, that's when I saw it the first time, I'm like, no one is going to get this. Yeah. If you don't know what an Ultron is, like, you're not going to get this.
Yeah, but overall, I thought the motivation to create Ultron was pretty solid. You know, I was kind of curious, what they were going to do, but it makes sense. You know, Tony was set up in the last Iron Man movie that he is pretty worried, about what's to come. You know, he's trying to surround himself with all of those Iron Man suits in his last movie. So it makes sense that he's worried. He wants to protect the place that he lives, the planet that he lives on. So I could see where he might really want to create an artificial intelligence to really help protect everybody, because like they've said in the Winter Soldier, sometimes you're out of their league. In the first Avengers movie, they had to make those Hydra weapons because suddenly there are gods and people from other worlds, and they have to prepare themselves.
Yeah, once it was there, it was kind of okay. I mean, it was good, but like getting to the point of like his creation was like they just dropped the name and like, okay, they're doing interfaces and matrices, and I'm like, okay, like we get with the tech jargon, just like what's going on here? Like, what are you trying to do with it?
Yeah. Exactly, and you, like you just said, tech jargon. This is kind of the first part of the movie where I kind of start wincing just a little bit, because I thought before all the dialogue was going really, really well. This movie has a lot of just in general kind of tech jargon going on, and it's not like any of it was hard to follow. Obviously some of it is just kind of like made up words off the top of Whedon's head, just trying to come up with ways to explain what's going on. But I think the tech jargon does kind of get a little jumbled. It kind of starts to sound a little goofy, and I thought maybe it could have been a little bit more straightforward. But, that was kind of the first part of the movie where things just started to feel a little less polished to me. When they started talking about the artificial intelligences and, like, the assimilation and like, just trying to get the perfect version.
Let's see, I'm gonna go on against that and say it's felt over-polished. Instead of under-polished. I feel like they had it, they were ready for it, but then the runtime was, they were like, this is way too long. We need to start making cuts. So they keep waxing it down, and they waxed out the parts that you and I would normally want to see. And that's where it disappeared. But I thought it was really interesting to see the black screen whenever Ultron was born. Like, that was, you hardly ever see black screen in these big action movies. And I thought that was really cool. And then Jarvis comes along and says little do and little yellow cube of interest, and kind of goes in there, and then he just kind of attacks Jarvis. I mean, again, a couple, like, there was some jumps there made that I just didn't get.
Yeah, that's one thing that that kind of bugged me too. There's a part where Jarvis is kind of left mangled and destroyed. We're not really sure if he's dead because there's part of him still left around. Kind of, I guess his carcass left behind, and they're just like, well, it doesn't make any sense. Ultron could have assimilated him or something like that. Then later in the movie, they bring up like, no, he was afraid of Jarvis. Everything just seemed really weird there. I think just the way they handled Jarvis in general was a little poor. I was never really quite sure what Jarvis was doing, if he was dead and, but his protocols were still intact, so he was trying to keep Ultron from the nuclear codes. I mean, honestly, they never could have brought up the word nuke at all in the movie, and I never would have thought about it. I never would have been like, oh, well, why isn't Ultron just trying to launch nukes? I think they could have left that part out, and I would have been fine. So the way, handling Jarvis was a little weird to me. What did you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it again, this comes down to tech jargon and things like, we don't know how Jarvis works in their world, and we're just kind of left to suspend our disbelief, so to speak, for those sections. And that's just kind of what they're like, well, we're going to ask the audience to suspend their disbelief for this, and we're going to roll with it. And it again, it's very minuscule moments in the film that pop you out. But again, it wasn't overall enough to hurt anything when Jarvis definitely reappears as the Vision.
Yeah, so nothing here quite yet is making me like worried about this film. But in this scene, in this kind of part of the movie, I personally finally get my first surprise. We get to see Falcon and War Machine in the party scene, and I was pleasantly surprised because we knew a lot about this movie already. Not exactly 100% what was going to go on point to point, but we kind of knew everyone that was going to be in the film, and I was really excited to kind of see these characters pop back up. We got some funny war stories from War Machine, and we got some funny stuff from Falcon and Captain America. So it was cool seeing these characters come back in, not in large roles. I mean, we do see War Machine later, but the Falcon doesn't pop back up until at the very end of the film. So I was pleasantly surprised to get a surprise in the movie, and that's something that I think overall I wanted more of, and I think that kind of talks to the point of there's too much planned out ahead of time. It would have been nice maybe if we didn't know phase 3 schedule so detailed, but yeah, I was happy to see those guys.
Yeah, definitely. And a couple points about this scene, I actually have notes on these. Whenever the Falcon's talking about the missing persons report, he's obviously referring to the Winter Soldier search. So a lot of people are like, oh, that's an Easter egg. I'm like, not really, like that's pretty obvious, but I put that under our Easter egg notes just to have some fun with that. And Stan Lee was here. This is where we got to see Stan Lee.
Yeah.
He said he was in there twice, but it's the same person just twice in a row at different times of day. Yeah,
I was definitely looking out for the second Stan Lee, and I was like, we didn't get another Stan Lee. Maybe Stan's just getting a little old, doesn't quite remember what he's been in. Or maybe they did do a second Stan Lee scene, and it just didn't make the final cut of the movie.
No, I think they filmed 2 scenes, one day, one night, and that's really what he's. I'm in there 2 scenes, right? Because he's normally in there only 5 seconds, and then he's cut. But yeah, he was in there as a war veteran who got to drink some of that 1,000-year-old liquor from Thor, and then we heard his drunken Excelsior as he was dragged away.
Oh, that was awesome! I love that little fan service there.
Yeah. So it was definitely this part up through the hammer lifting scene, and then. The scene right after that, the post Ultron crashing the party scene, was kind of a tense one, and that really built the tension with the team there, which carried on to the next section.
Yeah, I mean, we finally got our first kind of monologue from Ultron, not being cut up from the trailers, and man, it was great. I mean, that is one of the shining things in this movie that really stands out is James Spader played an amazing Ultron. I couldn't imagine anyone else in that role.
Yeah, it would be very hard to imagine anyone other than James Spader doing those Ultron lines, especially in the manner he did them, and where he goes from dark, scary person to like almost childlike anger and like quick back and forth. Like the mood change almost instantaneous. He played it so well. So yeah, I agree with you there entirely.
But yeah, once we kind of get through that fight scene, which was pretty cool to kind of see the heroes kind of have to tackle this surprise attack. Ultron steals the spear, and we kind of jump into our Wakanda next segment.
Yeah, it was actually South Africa on a salvage yard. But this is where we meet Ulysses Claw, a character in the comic books who deals in vibranium, and honestly, he was played really awesomely by Andy Serkis.
Oh, yeah, it was great. I mean, I would say it was a pretty standout performance for just a character that wasn't in it very much. And, I want to see him come back in another movie or maybe possibly Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He was really great.
Yeah, this would probably be one of the another bigger surprises for me was his character. We knew he was in it. I didn't know what role he had to play. But, he had the vibranium and he gave it to Ultron and he got his arm chopped off.
Yeah.
Which was Ultron was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure that's okay. Like, that was one of the moments where he turned and I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, but I think that's one point that I want to talk about real quick. I think one note I kind of have put down here is, everybody likes the Whedon-isms. Everyone likes his brand of humor and the way it meshes with the Marvel Universe. But I felt at some points in the movie it possibly could have been overreach. I thought, Claw losing his hand was pretty brutal. This is kind of the first time you got to see Ultron do something so vicious where he, basically hurt somebody instead of just fired laser beams at them. back in that penthouse scene. So I thought it was funny. His reaction was funny, but I kind of think I would have enjoyed that a little bit more if it was more serious, because once he does kind of make before he makes that little bit of a joke, he does go off the handle. He doesn't want to be associated with Tony. He's his own man. He's his own man robot, and he takes that really seriously. So some people could say, oh, that's just Ultron kind of being psychotic and jumping around between his personality, but I thought maybe some points of the film could have been left a little bit more serious to me.
See, I'm gonna go on the disagreement there. I didn't feel that one was a Whedonism because I'm so familiar with Ultron. Like, he is a spurned son. No matter which version you look, either the Hank Pym or this version. His creator doesn't want him. And I think that was like he's like a child. Like he's not fully grown. This is the first thing he does after leaving the Avengers. And so I feel that's his childish, like not knowing like what's going on. Like he got overcome by that emotion he's not used to yet. And that was it. Like later when he says like, oh, if I could throw up in my mouth, that was a Whedonism. But I feel that one kind of fit his, like, he doesn't know how to control emotions yet because he's so new. A little bit there. But cutting off Ulysses' claw hands leaves it open for the character named Claw to come into the Marvel Universe, who actually replaces his hand with this thing that shoots like sonic waves. And he will show, I guarantee you he'll show up in Black Panther.
Yeah, he's definitely going to show up with something, but I imagine he's going to maybe have like interchangeable arms or something like that. But I'm definitely looking forward to Andy Serkis coming back into the Marvel Universe because I thought he was great.
Yeah, especially when he's afraid of the cuttlefish.
Oh, yeah. That was funny because that cuttlefish scene was the scene in my first showing that I had to go to the bathroom because I just could not hold it in anymore. And I knew this movie was 2.5 hours long, so I was like, I got to pick a point to go to the bathroom.
You went with the large size drink, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I think the problem was I drank just too much liquid overall during the day. I should have known. I should have rationed my liquids knowing that I was going to a Marvel movie. But I caught that scene the next time around, and that was really, really funny. But I think I think the next biggest thing to talk about in this scene in general, because we get a little bit more twin action, we get another fight scene that kind of spurs. Not much going on fighting wise because the Scarlet Witch steps in, and this is kind of where we get our main kind of I don't want to say problem, but we get a major a reason of some motivations of the characters later in the movie is what the Scarlet Witch ends up showing them. And we didn't really know exactly what we were going to expect. You kind of summed it up at the beginning, but we got Thor, who had it looked like a future vision of Asgard. And we had Captain America, like you said, who had the vision of that kind of sock hop dance, that he could have had with Haley Atwell. And then we had we had a Black Widow who had her view of, what was it, the Red Room?
Yeah, it's called the Red Room.
Is that what it's called? And then my favorite part of that whole scene was where Hawkeye didn't get it because he'd done the whole mind control thing before and then stuck the arrow right in her head. That was really good. I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, he definitely, that was everyone's like, oh, Hawkeye, watch out, you're not going to be able to fight these guys, and he's just like, bam, right with that arrow to her forehead. And that was really cool. And also when Quicksilver tried to pick up the hammer.
Oh yeah,
that was a good like throwback to that party scene. He's like, oh, I got the hammer, and then he's like, no. But yeah, the Thor scene. You've actually texted me about the Thor scene.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a theory here with the Thor scene. It's kind of it's a not, I don't want to say far-fetched, but I don't think there's a whole lot of evidence to back it up. But during that scene, and I made sure to pay special attention the second time around. So that whole scene, the whole vibe you get from it is death. Idris Elba. What's his character in the movie again?
Heimdall.
Yeah, Heimdall. He's specifically kind of talking about death and dying, and that's very much the vibe that's going through the film. And we kind of get this one little offhand shot of this black hooded character just for a couple seconds that's walking, in the center of the frame. And it's kind of intercut with some other shots of some people like with white eyes drinking like booze and grog and stuff like that. But I think maybe that could possibly be alluding to Lady Death, which is a Thor character. You know, they seem to have a different rules for the afterlife in Asgard. It seems to be like if you die, you could possibly make a deal kind of with the devil or with death.
In Asgard, I mean, just to throw this out here, in Asgard you go to Hel, Hel, and it's ruled by Hela, Hela, who's technically in the Norse mythology the daughter of Loki. So if anything, I don't know if we'd see death, maybe Hela or death, either way.
Yeah, you know, well, it is a cinematic universe, so who knows? Maybe they could combine the two somehow. But you know, if you have read the Infinity Gauntlet, the book, or if you know anything about it, you know, a lot of Thanos' motivation as a character is his passion for the character Death, the embodiment of death. He's in love with death. So maybe this is kind of a way to bring death into the Marvel universe. You know, if Death is going to be in the Infinity Wars, you know, maybe she'll be introduced in Ragnarok, the next Thor movie. So we'll see. It's just a standing theory. You know, we'll see if it pays off. But you know, I wanted to let everyone know.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good thing. I paid attention for that the second and third times I watched it. But I came up with another idea. Scenes were filmed with Loki, and with you know the Tom Hiddleston as Loki, but they weren't put into the film. And I feel that could have been Loki, like sneaking up, like, you know, the god of mischief, like a snake or something. And it's not to discredit your theory. I mean, it could be either one at this point, since neither was shown. Either one is an option. But I feel like that would have been where Loki would have shown up in the film, if anywhere. Do you agree? Like, if they film Loki scenes, I don't know where else they would have put them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's curious to figure out if maybe they even wanted to put him in the film at all, because, you know, like you said, the biggest Marvel problem right now is their lack of good villains, and everyone thinks Loki's the best villain, but, you know, is it a crutch if you keep popping him up in every movie? You know, who knows? But overall, these kind of like I've been calling them visions. I haven't been calling them like flashbacks, because it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what they are, how much truth is there to them at all. But I think as they're shown in this light, I think they make sense and they're fine. But later on, when they pop up again, is when I start having problems with them. And we'll talk about that when we get to them. But I think now we can kind of jump into probably one of the best fight scenes in the movie, which was the Hulkbuster fight scene.
You mean Veronica?
Yeah.
They never once said Hulkbuster in the whole movie.
But we all know it's the Hulkbuster.
We know what it is. I mean, that's what's labeled on the packaging that I have out for my pop vinyls. So in this scene, I found out a tidbit. The Scarlet Witch possessed Hulk was supposed to be gray for this whole section.
Oh, that's cool.
But they ended up changing it pretty late back to green. I'm not sure why. They just they had merchandise with gray Hulk. I have a gray Hulk pop vinyl that was made early on. So
it's funny because there's a dialogue line later in the movie when they're trying to decide what they want to do with Vision's coffin or whatever, his cradle, and Bruce Banner looks over at the Scarlet Witch. He's just like, he says something like, "I'll crush you or I'll stop you," without even changing a shade. And obviously that alludes to him turning green, but that would have been also kind of made a little bit more of a play on if he actually turned gray when his mind was controlled. So I don't know. I kind of think maybe they should have made him gray.
Yeah, it definitely would have been interesting, because we all know, like, the savage, like, uncontrollable Hulk is definitely a gray version in the comics. But here, there was a really, really... we saw some of this in the trailers, but there was still a lot of this left in this fight that I didn't expect or get to see, and it's entertaining to see, like, whenever he's punching him, Iron Man's punching him, he's like, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep.
Yeah, that was good.
That's one of the things I keep referring back to because it's so entertaining. And Veronica was such an interesting idea as well, giving him different parts and pieces to fight the Hulk as he fought the Hulk.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Didn't know if you knew this, but Veronica is a reference to Archie.
Okay.
Because Bruce Banner, his love interest as Bruce Banner is Betty Ross, and then in Archie, there's Archie loves Betty and Archie loves Veronica.
Okay.
So Veronica is the foil to the Betty. So, like, that's when it's Hulk, it's Veronica.
Okay.
So a little bit of new fun tidbits for you there. So that was kind of kind of fun. I enjoyed that.
Well, I mean, overall, as the scene in general is, I think the trailer kind of stole some of the thunder of this scene. You know, I think the idea of the Hulkbuster being in the movie was a good idea. They definitely should have kept it in there, and I don't think they needed to keep it out of the trailer, but I felt like I just knew exactly when it was going to happen. You know, this film has a lot of visual landscapes that are very unique, so we knew that the Hulkbuster scene was going to happen in the arid desert. There's going to be lots of brown and dirt and sand and stuff like that. So once we established the scene that we were going to with this shipping yard and stuff like that, I was like, okay, well, this is when the Hulkbuster scene is going to happen. When's it going to happen? So there wasn't a whole lot of surprise left in that for me. But overall, I like the scene. I heard some people in the theater didn't quite catch one of the lines where he kind of takes his armor and he uses it as like a handcuff to grab the Hulk to take him out of the city, and then they start careening towards this building, and he's just like, Tony says really quickly, how quickly can we buy this building?
Yeah.
And that was really funny, and I knew a couple people that were sitting next to me leaned over to the people next to him like, oh, what did he say? Which is a shame because that was a really funny line, but I thought that was great, just like slamming them right through that building. That was really good.
Again, this is one of those instances where I don't think it's directly poking fun at Man of Steel, but, you know, every Marvel character helps civilians before they fight the bad guy. Uh-huh. And this was a situation where Iron Man's tearing up a city, and what's he do? Checks the building for people before he throws the Hulk through it.
Yeah. So overall, that scene was really, really cool, but, you know, I kind of wish they left some of it out of the trailer.
I'm actually gonna go on the other side of that. Like, it still surprised me. The commentary from Iron Man was funny. The fact that they mentioned Veronica early on when they were first building Ultron, and like that comes back later. It just, we knew they were gonna fight, but I didn't think the fight was gonna be that good. And the end scene where he just punches him off the frame was a reference to the Avengers 1, where he does it to Thor. Yeah, so that was pretty
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, but, you know, overall, I thought that was a pretty good way to kind of wrap up that scene. But, you know, this is kind of where we get into the point of the movie where I think we find most of the problems with it. You know, I really try to stray away from reviews. I try not to look at Rotten Tomato. You know, I try not to look at, like, Metacritic scores and stuff like that until after I've seen the film. So I try to make it not steer the way I judge a movie. But, you know, on Rotten Tomato, as of right now, Ultron has a 75%. And honestly, I think it earned the 75%. I don't think it's being critically panned. You know, I don't think it's above or under that 75%. And I think a lot of that comes from the next scene, which is where they go to the farm, which is where a lot of the problems I have in the movie kind of come to a head. So I'll just kind of, like, you know, bring out these points of the movie, and then we can kind of just talk about them, because I think we're going to get a lot of discussion out of this. So we go to the farm, and this is where we find out that Hawkeye has a wife. And you know, it was interesting, the funny banter that came along with that, where Tony was just like, okay, I'm sure this is an agent. Then the two kids run in, and there's like, and those are tiny agents. You know, I thought that was funny, but, you know, it didn't really make much sense that Hawkeye would have a wife. I don't know if Hawkeye ever has a secret wife with kids in the comic books at all. You know, I haven't kept track of his character that much, but I think it would have made more sense if it was maybe his sister and his niece and nephew. That would have made a little bit more sense to me. You know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that Hawkeye would be able to support a healthy relationship with a wife and kids in the kind of role that he's in, where he's basically like a super spy type deal. And obviously some people will probably come back and say, what do you mean that doesn't make sense? There's a talking robot in this movie that kills people. But it's just like, the motivation just doesn't make any sense. So I thought it would have been better if this would have been Hawkeye's like sister or something like that, because I don't think this story again needed another like love story, you know. And that goes into the next point, that I don't really care about the love story between Black Widow and Hulk. You know, I really couldn't care. You know, they try to make them similar by saying they're both kind of damaged people, but this kind of brings into the most cringe-worthy part into the movie. Which is the only part of the movie where I really cringed, is when Natasha is talking about how, back in the Red Room, they sterilized her. And that just kind of really took me out of the movie. I was like, this is a fun summer comic book movie, and you just brought up woman sterilization. And what did you think specifically about that scene? Because that just really threw me off. It just got into this really weird place of the film, and I just didn't really know how to respond to that.
Are you asking my opinion on the Hulk and Scarlet or Black Widow thing? I did it again, or the whole farm thing in general?
No, specifically of that love story, and then we can kind of talk about the rest of the stuff that's happened on the farm.
They didn't really need to ship that love story again. It may have been it was too on the nose at that point. I think the subtlety was out the window, and that was too on the nose. If they would have taken that out and left everything else, it would have been fine.
Yeah, it's really one of those things where it's just like I don't think it really contributed anything to the film. I don't think that it gave weight to the characters. I don't think it necessarily changed how they would have made decisions. It just felt really, just really out there, and then this is kind of where those visions kind of come to the head that was put into their minds. Captain America deals with it pretty well, so there's not too many ramifications there with him. But for some reason, this really disturbs Thor, and he kind of just pieces the fuck out. He just takes his hammer, and he's like, I got to go figure this out. I got to look more back into my vision of what happened. But no one else really seemed to care. It seemed to really bother Thor, so he thought he'd go find Dr. Selvig off the farm, but it still kind of encompasses this kind of second act of the movie. And, before we jump into what Thor does, what do you think overall about like kind of Hawkeye in this movie? Specifically with him having a family and just overall his role in the film from beginning to end.
Much better. I actually do know he has a family in the Ultimate Universe, and they are essentially he is betrayed by the Black Widow in the Ultimate Universe, and they are killed in front of him, and then they take him hostage, and like that changes like the character dramatically in the Ultimate Universe. So in this, like, if you know that, and like they've been setting up Hawkeye as like the weak point, like he's shot in the first battle. He doesn't have many powers. They talk about this as many powers. He has a lot more to lose than anybody else there, and he doesn't have the like his wife said, he's not a god like they are. He can't just take a hit and bounce back. Like he's got to get that skin graft and all the other stuff. I think they really humanize Hawkeye more than anyone else in this film, simply because in the first one they didn't hardly do anything with him at all.
Yeah, and
they set him up to look like he dies at the end the whole time.
Yeah, they're definitely alluding to that through the whole film. But overall, I'm going to say I didn't have a problem with Hawkeye being more human. I liked the point where they brought up, where Hawkeye is just a guy, and I liked where she said, it doesn't worry me. It worries me that they might need you. That just kind of shows how big of a threat that Ultron is overall. But I just really didn't like the idea of him having a secret family on a farm somewhere. It just seemed kind of weird. Like I never imagined like secret agents, who are like fighting crime, have like this satellite family that's just kind of in obscurity. If that was my wife, she would probably be pissed that I'm always gone risking my life every other day. She's just like, I really support your avenging and everything. And it's just like, no, I think there's a lot more fights that happen in that household of him risking his life.
See, I'm gonna go on the other way, because he hasn't been seen in 3 years in the Marvel Universe. He hasn't been in any other movies. He probably only goes out on these like small excursions when they find the scepter. So my guess is he's really probably been on that farm 90% of the time with his family, and he's only called upon when they like need him, and like she's totally cool with that.
Well, I think it's just pretty jarring because it is a surprise. It's set up to be a surprise that he has a family, and that's one part of the film that I just didn't really like. But I can get over it. It's not a big deal. But that's almost everything in this film. I can get over a lot of stuff in this film, so it's not a deal breaker.
I mean, it probably doesn't help if you go in with those preconceived notions of Hawkeye. From like you said, you from the comic. I don't remember, like you said, you don't remember him having family. But the Ultimate Universe, which I have read every one of, he does have that family and kids. So I guess it depends on if you go in with those preconceived notions or not.
Yeah, but every time that we've seen him in the Marvel Universe, he's a very kind of like secretive, straightforward dude. The first time we get to see him is in Thor, where he's like very mysterious, shrouded in darkness, and he's very much there supporting S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's basically just like a high-level agent that has like super cool skills of a bow and arrow and stuff like that, and then later we kind of see him in the same fashion at the very beginning of the Avengers, where he's like he's up in his little nest, protecting the scientists around the Tesseract and stuff. So I always imagine him just kind of being like not necessarily a dog for that's at the beck and call of Fury, but I imagine him being very ingrained in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s going-ons. You get to see in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show, that you can't really hold down a relationship with normal people, just like Coulson couldn't with that, what was it, the cellist from Colorado or Denver or something like that?
Right.
So, I just kind of expected everyone in this film who's like an agent, just is very secluded, but... overall, it does give weight to the character, though. You do feel worried towards that final battle, whether he's gonna survive. So I can get over it, but I think the part that this kind of segues into a little bit more, which was really bizarre, and I kind of talked to some other people about this, that it felt very out of place, was Thor going to that cave.
The Waters of Vision? I agree with you. There's something there that they cut out that you needed to know. Yeah,
I was almost going to ask you, did those Waters of Vision in that cave, I almost thought I thought it had to tie in to the last episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that I didn't get to watch, that you told me tied into Age of Ultron. I was just like...
No, it does not.
I was like, they had to have brought in Dr. Selvig for that episode and somehow explain these waters, because it just made no sense. Like, I was almost dead set on like, oh, Thor's going to go back to Asgard and he's going to like talk with some super smart old person that just knows a lot about the history of the universe or something like that to figure it out. No, he just goes to some very strange waters to get some answers from these water spirits that's not explained, and then he just kind of thrashes around in the water with lightning going around. It was very bizarre.
Yeah, well, if you notice, Selvig walks in with a box in his hands, and we don't know what's in the box. Mm-hmm. So like they've gone on some mystery journey history lesson here to get this, and we even saw the lady getting naked in the waters in the trailer. Yeah, that was clipped out. Yeah, so there's some scene here, a full scene filmed with Selvig and Thor that was just ripped out of the film, and then we kind of get this jarring version. And they did the same thing in the first Avengers, though, whenever he got thrown off the helicarrier and it takes him like forever to get his armor, and there was a scene where he talks to Odin about responsibility and stuff like that, and they cut that out of that movie. Mm-hmm. So we can see, Thor is the first person to get cut from any movie for runtime in the second half. Yeah, well, either way, I think that is one of the bigger problems of the movie, because whether it could have been explained better with some other scenes, it just really kind of just makes the middle part of this movie very jarring, because just overall, I'm not expecting to necessarily go on a 24/7 every second roller coaster ride when I go see a Marvel movie. I get it that they need downtime to explain things and get things right, but overall, I think that farm scene is just the weakest part of the movie. It really brings the pace of this movie down to a halt. The only kind of cool parts we get is when it's intercut with Ultron like going to South Korea to start building the Vision in that cradle. But I just wasn't a big fan of the farm scene. Well, I mean, your mistake here is including the water scene with the farm scene. That's actually during the cradle scene. I'm just kind of lumping it all together just because that is the moment when Thor decides to leave, so I'm just kind of connecting that all together. But I just felt like everything that kind of runs through and is connected to the farm scene, Hawkeye having a wife and kids, and then you have the weird love story with sterilization that's brought up just very abruptly, very out of place, and then, Thor peacing out, it was all kind of weird, and we got to see Nick Fury pop up, so that was cool. You kind of got to expect Nick Fury to come somewhere. Yeah. When I talk about it, I mean, I have to include the Korea scene because, a lot of the things picked up here are resolved in that Korea section. Mm-hmm. Like the Oslo, whatever, where Tony Stark goes to find the Jarvis bits. Mm-hmm. For the nuclear codes. That scene's kind of cut short as well.
So should we just kind of jump into this whole South Korea thing?
Yeah, because of the things, like some of the things you're bringing up there are finished there, and we gotta jump into that to talk about those because, like, Tony Stark goes to find what's stopping Ultron from getting the nuclear codes.
Yeah,
and come to find out is Jarvis, and that's kind of like glossed over in like maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, I'm breaking into your stuff. He says something like that.
Yeah, and but the Captain America, Hawkeye, and Black Widow taking on Ultron to get this Vision body was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that scene was really cool. It's kind of like a pseudo heist, pseudo chase scene. That was kind of cool. We kind of finally get to see how Vision's going to come to life. I was really curious how Vision was going to be brought up here, but he's basically introduced saying like, okay, we're going to use this cradle right here that builds tissue. That's all it builds is tissue. So hypothetically, before Ultron ever showed up or the mind gem showed up, we could basically make a tissue of a human, but it couldn't really do anything.
Well, no, she says you can't build a whole body. You can only repair tissue. Oh. But the vibranium is what helped them build the whole body.
Yeah, which was just kind of weird. Is Vision made of vibranium or adamantium in the comic books?
Yes.
Okay, because it just did seem kind of weird because we don't know a whole lot about vibranium. We know it can make a shield. We know it's very scarce and it's just really strong. It was kind of weird that like, vibranium alloy can bind with human flesh.
It can make tissue like of vibranium, and Ultron I think said it best. Like, it's hard to believe until he says he's like it's the most versatile element in the world, and they made a frisbee out of it.
Yeah, that part was pretty funny. So, but overall, this is kind of one of those things where I can gloss over it. I can easily just go like, it's a comic book movie. I get it. I'm not going to dive too deep into the physical properties of vibranium because it's an imaginary element. So that didn't bother me too much. But it was kind of cool to kind of see how the Vision is being composed and how important the mind gem overall was. If the mind gem didn't exist, Vision wouldn't exist. They're one and the same.
I think that one of the other surprises that got me here was, I've always said Loki's scepter was the mind gem. I've said this for years. But the colors weren't making sense. And then they popped the mind gem out of this blue shell, and now it's a yellow gem, which also doesn't make any sense. But whatever, they can do whatever colors they see fit. But they confirm it's the mind gem.
Yes.
And they pop it right in the Vision's head, and I'm like, they did it right. Like that was it. That's all we needed to know. Whedon is continuing his run. Like, he started with the scepter and he's finishing with the scepter, and like that was awesome.
Yeah, and I think overall this is going to be really good later in the franchise because, these gems are so important to this all of these phases of the movie. So why not take one of these gems and make it a character? It was really important for them to bring Vision in. So, this is basically the scene where we start to see him put together, and Ultron's master plan is he's going to upload his consciousness into this new body because throughout the film you see him upgrading his body,
that's one thing I have a beef with is like he got his first body when he showed up with the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Like, how did he get that body? That body was never on the table. Like, where did that one come from?
Well, if you take a look because he uploads himself to the internet and he jumps all the way back over to Sokovia or whatever. If you kind of start looking at that dimly lit robot factory that sparks start flying, you can kind of see his chest piece in the background a little bit.
Okay, see, I didn't see it because I was looking at the face. I'm like, that's a drone face. That's not the actual final face. So I thought like those were his drone bodies everywhere.
Yeah, but you can see his chest piece in there, so it makes sense that like those pieces were out there, and it was, I guess it was Hydra's idea originally to make Ultron, or
they were making AI. They were just making robots.
Yeah, so they just had robot components laying around, and Ultron uploaded himself to the net and just like, I'm just going to take these.
Yeah. So yeah, and he's going to upload the Vision's body, and then they go on this chase scene to get the Vision out of there, and then that's when Captain America finally recruits the Witch and Quicksilver to their side. So that was cool.
So
I don't really have much else on that part. Like, that part was pretty solid.
I think the biggest thing to take away from this segment, because like we said at the very beginning of this review special, is it's going to be kind of hard. It's going to be kind of boring to point out the stuff that we really liked, because we liked the majority of this film. The one thing I can kind of pull out of the scene that I really didn't enjoy was Black Widow getting kidnapped. Later in the movie, it doesn't really hold much weight that she gets kidnapped. I just thought it was just kind of dumb. She didn't really need to get kidnapped. It didn't really change what they needed to do. They still needed to find Ultron.
But she was the point where they found him.
Yeah, but I could have seen them explaining it any millions of ways how they found Ultron. It could have been different. Like maybe instead of her getting kidnapped and kind of being the helpless female character that she is not, she is very, very much powerful on her own. Maybe instead of, she did get left behind. Let's say she did fall out of that Quinjet, but maybe she had the scent on Ultron, and maybe she followed him with other means. Maybe she went back and picked up that motorcycle that kind of got half destroyed by that truck or whatever, and she started following him. I don't know. I just thought the kidnapping plot point was kind of weak, and I don't think she needed to be taken.
See, I'm gonna go on the opposite, that she did, because she showed that she was resourceful. She was able to build a radio to do Morse code by herself in that dungeon.
Yeah, but
Ultron said he wanted an audience. Like, he explained why. He's like, well, you scarred me. When they look at me, they will only see a monster, because of Captain America's shield across his chest. Mm-hmm. Then he ripped that body apart and showed his new vibranium body.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty cool. I mean, I guess they needed some sort of human there that he could talk to, since basically everyone had abandoned him since the twins left him. So that was a really cool scene. I like seeing him rip through that old body, because the Ultron that was revealed, the Ultron that like looked like it's been juicing, it looked a lot like the Ultron from the comic books, and that was really cool because he looked a lot. He looked a lot deadly.
He was a lot scarier.
Yeah, he did. That's a good way to put it. He did look scarier. But from there, do we just kind of do we just want to jump into the final scene, or?
Well, we got Vision. I want to talk about the Vision real quick.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't have to go a lot in this, because I want people to experience that. I mean, it's an experience to see the Vision come to life. Mm-hmm. To see Jarvis get a body played by Paul Bettany, who actually voiced Jarvis. Mm-hmm. And he come out and he chose the cape because of how Thor looked. But then he's like, you can believe me or you can not believe me, but we need to go now. And he's just holding that hammer. Mm-hmm. And there were like people like gasping and like a good reaction in like the second showing I was in at that point, because everyone in that scene is just like looking at the hammer, and they're like, oh, which is a great throwback to that first scene where they're trying to pick up the hammer to see who's worthy.
Yeah. Now, so overall, I thought that was very humorous, and it's a really good way to just get to the point that you can trust the Vision. We don't have to go through all this minutia of the Avengers arguing back and forth, and the Vision needs to prove himself. But we talked about in some of the previous episodes of our podcast that I was really, really, really hoping that the very first person to ever pick up that hammer, the person that would be really, really worthy to wield it would be Captain America. Because we saw him wiggle it a little bit, and that basically showed like, he maybe he has the ability to pick it up, if he's desperate enough and he really needs it, and he needs to save his friends and he needs to save the world. I was really, really hoping, when they eventually get to fight Thanos, that hammer still hasn't been picked up yet, and like Steve Rogers is just has nothing left. Shield's like broken and shattered. He's beaten to a pulp. All of his friends are just like laying on the ground, and he just like out of desperation just grabs his hammer and he actually picks it up. And I was really crossing my fingers that scene was going to happen, but now I don't think that scene is going to carry any weight whatsoever. Now that the Vision can just pick it up, I don't think it was wasted necessarily on the Vision. I think it's still cool to put it there, but obviously this is Whedon's last movie. He doesn't necessarily, if he wants to use it now, he's going to use it now. He's not going to save it for the Russo brothers.
Well, I don't think it loses any weight. He just showed he could pick it up. I think we will see it in Infinity War Part 2 as when Steve gets to use it as a weapon, because a lot of these people are their final contracts in Infinity War Part 2. If they end up dying and need brought back by the gems, like you said, like they're dead, like who's going to pick up the hammer? Mm-hmm. I imagine Captain America picking up and using it as an actual like lightning like weapon to fight with. So I think we'll see it, and I think it'll be even better in Infinity War Part 2 when it's used as a weapon rather than just a Vision hitting Ultron once and holding it once.
Yeah, but I really can't knock the movie for doing this because it was really great. But I just personally really wanted to see it used for the first time in Infinity Wars.
The way they revealed it though was superb. Like he's there talking, and then it just kind of shifts over to the left, and then there's the hammer. And you're like, oh, okay. Like we can trust the Vision. He can hold the hammer.
Yeah, but now we finally get into that. We get into the final act, which was really great because it was like the one thing that we really didn't get a whole lot of in the trailer at all. So it was still a really big mystery to me. I didn't know what we were getting into.
Yeah, there was a lot going on here. We've talked about this. A lot of the scenes we saw in the commercials actually had different backgrounds replaced in them. Mm-hmm. If you look at Steve's like, I got no plans tomorrow. Like that's actually in Avengers Tower, not in the Sokovia. Like the image is shot to look like. A lot of fight. They worry about the civilians first and foremost, which is awesome.
Yeah, Superman.
yeah, suck it, Superman. There's just a lot. I mean, the biggest part to me in this, and this is, I don't know how you feel, is when Nick Fury shows up with the original helicarrier. Did not see that coming.
Yeah, I didn't see it coming either, but like, couldn't we get some sort of explanation? He says he got it. He dusted it off from some friends.
Yeah, he went back to drop Banner off and to talk to Hill, and that's where he got it from.
Yeah, but I thought we were under the impression that like S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't so much exist anymore. They didn't have a whole lot of resources. It was still kind of being built up, and we saw all of those helicarriers just crashing.
Well, those were the new ones. This is the original one. The original one was not in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping, if they were going to bring it back, maybe they could have made it look like an older model, maybe. Since the first one we saw had that dual runway, maybe they could have just made it like a single runway and made it look maybe slightly rusted or something like that. It would have been cool maybe if it just kind of looked like actually something he dusted off for real.
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, this is a helicarrier. It's been upgraded to have those helper pods, like the escape pods, like to go pick people up. I mean, I think honestly, if I was to guess, Maria Hill was using money from Tony Stark to build this in secret for the rescue situations. I just think it was awesome to see Nick Fury back in his original dress on his original helicarrier with the guy from Winter Soldier who didn't want to push the button. The guy who didn't want to push the button in Winter Soldier was actually the guy there who's like, and we're locked and stocked and the things are full of people. So that was that same guy, which was a pretty cool throwback, like, those are true S.H.I.E.L.D. agents he could trust.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. But overall, I thought this ending scene was pretty cool. We got some really cool dialogue, a nice speech from Hawkeye. We got some really cool stuff going back and forth between these characters. The one thing I think I could pull out of here that I didn't like too much was I felt like the battle kind of lost a little bit of weight just because they were fighting the same enemy over and over again. It was just more robots, more robots, more robots. Oh, here's some more robots. Oh, here's a wave of more robots. The nice thing about when the Chitauri invaded New York, at least we kind of had three different types of Chitauri. We kind of had the foot soldiers, we had the dudes on those like flying jet skis, and then we had the big giant worms. They kind of had to do a little bit more problem solving of how to fight these guys. But this was just Ultron's wave of like cannon fodder that they destroyed very easily. They just kind of like threw a shield at it or zapped it with a taser. And then they were just kind of down for the count. So, it kind of would have been cool maybe if Ultron, designed a couple different types of robots. Maybe some big ones that had like a lot of metal attached to them. Maybe some different classes of drones. I thought that could have been a cool addition.
I'm actually going to go with numbers. The numbers, like we saw that promo art from San Diego last year, I think it was, and it was just Ultron bots like overrunning the Avengers. And that's essentially what we got. That image was pretty much it. Like all these Ultron, like he had sheer numbers, but at the same time, the Avengers had to like. It wasn't just fight these robots. It was fight the robots and get the people out. So I think the single bot type worked because there were so many of them, and we got to see that in the final thing where that thing's spinning in the middle, and all of the people are there fighting all those Ultron bots. Like that was true to that image, and I feel pretty awesome. Like. Knowing that image was like that.
Yeah, and well, that was one really great scene that you brought up. Was we kind of got that. I don't really know if that scene has a name in the first Avengers, where they've kind of got that full circle roundabout shot where you got to see all of them in a circle, because we kind of got that again but upgraded. They weren't just standing there, they were all fighting in a giant circle, and it was kind of in slow-mo, and like Captain America was doing like misty flips in the air with his shield and stuff, and everyone was just destroying bots and just obliterating them. And then from that fight you get that busting out of the Vision's like mind gem blast out of his forehead, and they all fire at Ultron. That was really rad.
Yeah, a fun note about that, when his face is melting from those blasts, that actually the red heat glows up to the face from the comic books.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I was wondering if you were going to pick up on that. That is really cool. It would be cool if we can find a screen grab for that and do like a little side-by-side. But yeah, that was cool, a little homage that, Joss Whedon, someone who really cares about the comic books, will pay attention to. But I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire film comes from this last battle, was Hawkeye talking to Scarlet Witch. He was just like, we're in a floating city fighting killer robots, and I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes any sense. I just thought that whole line was just pure. It was just pure gold, and I could watch this whole movie. Could have been total garbage. It wasn't. It could have been, and if that scene was there, I would still rewatch it just so I could see that. That was just great.
That was good, and I think also one of the better scenes is the Vision talking to the last Ultron bot, like like talking about it was like kind of one of those things at the end of South Park where Kyle's like, and you know what we learned today? And it's like the Vision and Ultron, and the Vision's like, this is what we learned. But again, I was born yesterday. So it was entertaining, and it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we didn't get a definitive destruction of Ultron. Vision says when he kind of first is born, he says, I don't want to destroy Ultron. He says what is he, like an interesting creature? Or
he's
what
unique.
Is he? Yeah, he's unique. And at the very end, we see a big blast from the mind gem, but we do not actually see Ultron die. I've heard some people say that maybe he thinks he stored Ultron in the mind gem or something like that, or maybe he transported him somewhere. But I think this kind of alludes to, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Ultron pops back up in another film.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. That's not for me, because Vision goes out of his way to kill the bots before War Machine can. Later on. So I think Vision was very adamant on getting rid of Ultron thoroughly, much like he does in the comics / Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Plus, the Soul Gem is usually what people are stored, or things are stored in the universe, but that's a story for another day. And then at the end, that leads us to the new Avengers facility.
Yeah, we kind of, they saved the day, and then we kind of roll back into a scene that we are familiar with from the last Avengers, where Tony's rolling out in an Audi. So we get that Audi again rolling up to the new Avengers facility.
Yeah, the new Avengers is, called New Avengers because there's another book called The New Avengers, which is another team of Avengers. That's most notably where Wolverine and Spider-Man joined. So that was interesting. They talk about the hammer being worthy in an elevator.
Yeah, that was really hilarious.
You sent me an image of a hammer in an elevator. You're the second person to send me that image today, and that was very entertaining.
Yeah, I got to get that life-size prop. I love that hammer.
Yeah, and then we meet. Everyone kind of goes. The end of this movie sets up everyone on the chessboard for Phase 3. Captain America and Black Widow are training these new Avengers recruits who are, the War Machine, the Vision, Falcon, and Scarlet Witch. All right, Tony, he's like giving up. He's like, maybe I'll go do something else. It doesn't really say.
Yeah, but we all know that doesn't even really count, because he's showing up in Civil War. He's like he's like the biggest billable character that they can put in any movie. We know we're going to be seeing him again, so it doesn't really matter where he goes. He's just going on vacation. He's going to go chill with Pepper on an island somewhere for a couple weeks.
Yeah, Thor goes back to Asgard to learn more about these Infinity Stones, why they're showing up frequently.
And he cares nothing about your lawn maintenance.
He does not. And then the Hulk is hiding somewhere. So we know he doesn't get his own movie. Will he show up somewhere else? We don't know.
Yeah, we're kind of getting that sad, moping, wandering Hulk.
The lonely man where he walks down the road with his thumb stuck out.
Yeah, but I think that makes sense because it kind of makes them all getting back together, getting the gang back together a little bit more strong by separating them. I would imagine Banner's just trying to distance himself from everything because he's just tired of just fucking everything up, destroying everything.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see because I mean they're all like this. The end of this film puts them all in places for Phase 3, where they probably Tony and Cap will interact in Civil War, but after that, I don't think they will again until Infinity War. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna be interesting to see where that goes.
But man, let's just end this really in depth talk about this movie with that teaser.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Yeah, Thanos grabs his gauntlet and pops it on.
Oh, man.
It's a left-handed gauntlet,
which
confirms there are 2 gauntlets in this Marvel universe.
Yeah, because you said that the one that's in Thor in the Asgard chamber is a right-handed gauntlet?
It's a right-handed gauntlet. This one he pops on here is a left-handed, and Thanos normally wears a left-handed gauntlet. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I mean, Kevin Feige said there are 2 gauntlets.
Oh, okay, because I would have just assumed it was like a mistake, that they just forgot to build the gauntlet on lefty instead of a righty.
No, I mean, honestly, I could see there being 2 gauntlets. Like, how do you defeat Thanos with an Infinity Gauntlet? Well, someone else with another gauntlet. I mean, that's not how they did it in the books, so they can do whatever they want in the movies.
Yeah, I guess so. That kind of opens up a whole new thing. But man, I love what he said. He's just like, "Fine, I'll do it myself."
Yeah.
Which just kind of shows you he's either definitely watching over the earth with a fine-tooth comb, or maybe somehow he was pulling some strings down there to get Ultron made. Maybe he was trying to find another way to destroy the earth.
Yeah, I honestly, we don't know, but that was a great stinger to the movie, like to get you hyped.
Yeah, and
it goes along great with the Thanos one in the first one.
Yeah, and that just kind of rolls into the Infinity Stones in general. This is kind of going to be the last bad thing I say about this film, was I thought the way kind of Thor just deciphers how important these gems are through his magical water fairy dream was just kind of weird. The Guardians figured it out from a reputable dealer source, and we got this nice little visual explanation of what they are. I think we could have just left it at that.
Well,
and maybe
I'm going to stop you there because Dark World, his father talks about the Infinity Stones in the book. Mm-hmm. With Thor and Jane were there. And then if Volstagg and Sif know about them because they take them to the Collector, Asgardians probably know about the Infinity Gems.
Yeah, so maybe Thor should have just been clued in already. Maybe he could have saw the gem on Vision's forehead and just already kind of knew what it was. Overall, I think we've talked about it enough that we don't like that water cave scene or whatever.
Yeah.
But overall, just in general, as this whole film, there's definitely parts in it that I think we personally would have liked to seen handled differently. But overall, we definitely don't hate this movie. We love this movie. We had a great time. You've seen it 3 times already. I've seen it twice, which is a big deal for me because I'm not a big movie rewatcher, especially going back to a theater and seeing it again. But this movie was so fun.
Yeah, it really was. And to kind of cap this episode off, let's go over the Easter eggs I found in it to make it even more fun.
Yeah, this is always the part that I look forward to. You're always on top of Easter eggs, man.
Yes. So first off, I want to talk about Quicksilver dying. We didn't really touch that. A character introduced so quickly. He had a full story arc, and he died. But did he really die? In the last episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Coulson mentioned Tahiti still being in play. Because he was going to wipe Ward's mind. So he could come back because it's used for Avengers, right? Who knows if he'll come back? Maybe the Time Stone? I don't know. Is he dead? What do you think?
I don't really know. I think I want to say it's a good thing that we have the Russo brothers tackling the Infinity Wars, because I think the more directors that are managing all these heroes, the better. But I don't think we are going to be missing out if Quicksilver's gone. I think it's easier for him to be missing since there's no Magneto, there's no family ties, so it's not like a huge loss. I think was it Aaron Taylor
Johnson.
Yeah, I think he played a great Quicksilver. You know, some people out there had issues with the twins' accents in general. I'm really not too sensitive to accents. You know, even a bad accent sounds good to me, so it didn't bother me too much. But yeah, I didn't have any problems with the Quicksilver, but I'm not really missing anything if he doesn't show up in any other movies.
I think this whole Fox using Quicksilver probably was like not a reason Marvel used it, but a reason Marvel's not worried about having him, because he was going to be killed off in the original script anyway. And then if he comes back, you know, I could definitely see it. But I think Aaron Taylor Johnson had an issue. He didn't want to sign up because of so many. He didn't want to be contracted to so many films.
Oh, okay.
And if his character died off, he's not really contracted to too many films, is he? No, he's not. So that's it. So yeah, that's again not to get us off course from the Easter eggs. So Friday, the AI Tony used at the end is actually an AI from the comics during the Matt Fraction run right before Dark Reign. So that was actually an AI he used, and he taught it, and it was a child, and then it grew up and became a teenager, and Tony didn't use it for a while, so it was like very mad at him, kind of like Ultron was. So I thought that was interesting. But if you look at the tapes he's choosing, you also see Jocasta. Jocasta is the bride of Ultron. He makes like a woman that he's going to put the Wasp in the comics, and like Jocasta was the shell for that woman.
Oh man, only Golden or Silver Age comics would think a robot needs a wife.
Right, Bride of Frankenstein kind of deal.
Yeah.
We talked about the missing persons. The Shield agent was from Winter Soldier. Veronica is from Archie. Helen Cho, the lady who builds the skin graft things. She, in the comics, she is the mother of Amadeus Cho, who is like the sixth smartest person in the world.
Oh, okay.
He's part of the Illuminati in the new comics right now, and
okay.
That's pretty cool. He worked with Hercules and the Hulk for a while. The new Avengers, we talked about that being a team of secondaries. Ulysses Claw is Claw in the comic, and he loses his hand arm, and we'll probably replace it with a claw. Ultron's face, we talked about that. Oh, and the red cape around Ultron's face at the beginning, when he reveals himself, is from a scene in the comics where he calls himself the Crimson Cowl.
Oh.
And he goes by that name before he says, I am Ultron in the comics. So, like, that was an interesting, like, reveal real quick there. Like, a throwback before they revealed, like...
Oh, that's cool.
A couple of questions I walk away with, and we can, you know, try to answer them, but, like, let's probably not. Let's have our people answer them. So, Ultron and Scarlet Witch's relationship was kind of mentioned. Like, in the end, he's like, go, Wanda, and, like, why does he care about her? I think maybe it might be the Mind Gem. Since they're both created from the Mind Gem. But in the comics, you know, the Ultimate Comics, Ultron falls in love with the Scarlet Witch, and then he kills her because he can't have her.
Okay.
But she has his cowl, that red cowl, in the scene on the train with Captain America. I don't know if you noticed that. She's got a red cowl. That's the one that he was wearing at the throne room.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Early on. Yeah, I cut that the third time today. What are exactly our Ultron's powers? He shoots red lasers. He has these gravity lift gauntlets things.
Yeah.
And is he have a vibranium shell at the end? They didn't really say or not.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that his body was going to end up being made of vibranium, you know, but it actually, I guess, all the vibranium funneled into Vision? I don't know.
Yeah, and the bomb that drops, or the thing that lifts the world up, or the town up into the sky. And lastly, can the Vision exist without the Mind Gem in his head?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of the Vision being one and the same with the Mind Gem. You know, I kind of like him being an embodiment of one of these gems more than just being something created by it. You know, it just makes him a little bit more special. It makes him way more powerful.
Yeah, I think so too. But Ultron was also created from the gem. But I don't know. Like, will he die for Thanos to obtain it? It's the real question. So that's what I really walked away with there at the end.
Yeah, this will definitely be interesting. This overall just makes me really excited for more of the Marvel Universe. You know, I can't wait to visit space again. I want to go back with the Guardians and see how space is shaping up, and how, you know, if the Earth pops back up on Star-Lord's radar, you know, I really want to see Star-Lord come back to Earth and see all these heroes. And you know, I just think this is going to be great when we get to the Infinity Wars and everyone just gets to pop back up in these movies. I think it's just going to be a crazy, amazing time, and my eyes are just going to be like just filled with utter childlike joy. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah,
but
exactly, and they have a lot to live up to. Like, this was so good; they have a lot to live up to, and I think they're going to deliver.
Yeah, but more importantly, let's kind of hope they keep their mouth shut on Phase 4. I want to go into the Infinity War not knowing what's going to come. Like, I don't want them to announce a new Captain America movie before I see the Infinity Wars, because I think Captain America might die in the Infinity Wars, and I don't want to know that there's going to be another movie. I want Phase 3 to kind of cap off this Marvel Cinematic Universe very, very nicely. I will totally be okay with more films, but I want these first 3 phases to be all contained to these gems. I want them to be standalone, and then I maybe bring in new talent for the new movies. Maybe Kevin Feige wants to go do something else, and they bring in a new guy to helm the new addition to the universes. But I'm looking forward to the Infinity Wars just topping everything off with a nice little bow, and I want to see how things end up.
Yeah, I think they got a lot to live up to with this being such a great entry and such a good sequel / finish to Whedon's Avengers. Like, they can go wherever they want with theirs. Mm-hmm. Since this, was like, if I look at Avengers and I look at Age of Ultron, they go well together.
Yeah.
And they're going to kickstart off Phase 3. Well, kind of. We'll see what Ant-Man does.
Yeah.
But kicking off Phase 3, putting people on the board where they need to be, and did a great job, and I will probably see it 2 more times before it's out of theater.
Yeah. Well, man, this was really great. I really liked sitting down and just dissecting this movie. It was really fun. I think we're going to be doing a spoiler cast for, I think, every major superhero release. We're definitely going to be doing them for the DC universe too. So we're equal opportunity lovers of comic books. So definitely come back for our Ant-Man spoiler review. What is that, next month?
July.
Oh, so we got like 2 months then.
Yeah, July, and then right after that would be Fantastic Four. Mm-hmm. And then probably Star Wars will be our huge one.
Oh, that'll be huge. Yeah, so we really hope you guys like this spoiler cast. If you really liked it, share it with your friends. They can kind of jump into our brains, jump into the world of our love for superheroes. But Chris, if they want to follow more of your opinions on the Marvel universe, or maybe get a glimpse of how you feel about these movies before we record these podcasts, where can they follow you?
Yeah, they can follow me at Valdan, VALDAN, on Twitter, or ComicUI news. We also have Facebook and Twitter on ComicUI, so look us up there. You can tell us if we're right, if we're wrong. We appreciate criticism, so let us know that too. Mm-hmm. Mike, where can I tell you you're wrong at?
Well, you guys can tell me I'm wrong at Mike Royer Design, either on Twitter or Instagram. And also, you can go read my webcomics at pickledcomics.com. That's where you can find me, where you can call me stupid for not liking Hawkeye's wife and wishing it was his sister instead. But as always, if you're a fan of the show, please, please, please visit superheroslate.com. That is the best place to find all of these links, all of our show notes for our weekly episodes. That's where you can find the links to our YouTube channel, where we also put our show on. You can find links for our iTunes, where you can review us. That's I think that's the best way to support any podcast, especially ours, is go on iTunes and review the show. It kind of helps us I believe, be more visible in kind of their rankings and their recommended shows. So please definitely do that. And, you can find our email address up there, and, you can just contact us and connect with us anywhere. We're all over the place, and we love talking about superheroes.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But at the current time, my battery is running low, and I have to go to the bathroom. So I think that's going to be it for this podcast.
Cool. Yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.